This is my fault. Well, not just me and a bunch of you out there, you know who you are. We've been shouting from the rooftops for a premium AeroPress. And you know the saying, be careful what you wish for. This is easily one of the most confusing products that I've encountered. And when I first got it, I had absolutely no interest in making this video. But having lived with it for about 6 months or so, I have some thoughts. And hopefully by now you know that we don't half-ass things, so get ready for some live brewing side by side with the OG AeroPress, blind tasting, temperature tests, and we even do a bit of math. So let's get into it. Now before we get started, my friend Sohas from Benki Brewing Tools sent this to me and said do whatever you want with it. So here we are. Now I'll kick things off with a brief history. Now I'm not going to tell you what the AeroPress is. If you somehow find yourself here and you don't know what an AeroPress is, you, my friend, are what they call lost. So Alan Adler is a serial inventor, and somewhere around 2005, he launched the first AeroPress, and it has since exploded in popularity, rightfully so. Now with this popularity comes a massive fan base and a huge number of requests for accessories, different sizes, different materials, so on and so forth. But Alan had no interest in that. He had created one product that worked really well. In fact, since 2005, the AeroPress has remained largely the same. And as plastic tech has improved and become more and more food safe, they just switched materials out every few years. And that's about it. But then in 2021, he wanted to step away from the company. So AeroPress was acquired by a company called Tiny with big ambitions. So just in the last few years, we have seen an insane number of brand new products from AeroPress. And at the very helm sits this flagship, the AeroPress Clearest. Sorry, the Premium. And before I get into the critique and why I'm so confused by this product, let's start with the aesthetics because it's got a lot going for it. Now, we don't usually do unboxings, but this is a flagship product and the experience is quite enjoyable. So let's do that first, see what's in the box, and then look at visual design. So first up, you have the box itself, which is very nice. It even has this magnetic door which reveals the product. Inside, you get a manual, you get a metal scoop, a metal paddle, you have this chunky filter cap with a bunch of paper filters, and then the AeroPress itself. And much like any of the other AeroPresses now, compared to the OG, you don't get the funnel, you don't get the filter holder. You also used to get way more filters. And honestly, for the price, I think they should have at least included the new metal filters that they sell. But anyway, let's move on. Okay, one of the things that really annoyed me about this is how much I like how it looks. It's a big reason why I even made this video. I mean, just look at it. It's beautiful. As humans, we're fascinated by giant and miniature things, which is why the AeroPress has always been an interesting looking brewer to me because it's basically a giant syringe. I really like the clear AeroPress because it's clear and you can see what's happening in the brewing process. While there is no functional benefit to that, I think it just adds a whole lot of enjoyment to the brewing process. And this takes that to a whole other level. You get the clarity of glass, and the fact that it's double walled does really interesting things when it catches the light. That combined with the metal, I think just makes for a very, very cool looking product. Super interesting to look at. And the metal now comes in 3 finishes. There's a white, black, and this silver. I still think the original looks the best. So yeah, I really like how this thing looks, and that definitely helps cushion some of the bigger issues I have with this brewer. So let's move on to build quality. All right, coming to build quality, this is where things get very confusing. For me at least. On one hand, we have a product that if you drop, it will shatter. And on the other hand, if someone were to break into my house, I would not hesitate to reach for this thing. It's like freaking Thor's hammer. This filter cap alone weighs more than I do, but it makes no sense to me in the AeroPress world. And you may ask why. Let me explain. The truth is, when I thought about a premium AeroPress, I always pictured something that's fully metal. Maybe dual wall or with a thick silicone sleeve like the brew chambers on the Flare have. But this, never. It just doesn't make sense to me. A metal one would of course be a little heavier, but it would still maintain the core essence of an AeroPress. It would be portable, it would be hard to break, it would brew the same delicious coffee. So in my opinion, that would have made way more sense for a brand like AeroPress to put out than this. But that's just my opinion. I would love to know what you think. And while it is lovely to have that clear window to see what's happening with your coffee, like I said, it's not functional. So you could have a very nice looking all metal AeroPress and brew delicious coffee without all of the compromises that come with something like this. So when it comes to build quality, it is excellent, but it's also not. Confusing, right? But now let's make some coffee and look at how it is to actually use this thing and whether it brings something extra to the table considering the premium title and the hefty price tag. Oh wait, I almost forgot. We have this trash. Yep, these are the accessories that you get with the AeroPress Premium, the scoop that we've seen with other AeroPresses, and the stirrer. We're familiar with this, but these just feel cheap. Yes, they're made of metal, I think aluminium, but you have some weird weld marks over here. This feels like a punch sheet. I mean, it just lacks the refinement that the main product has. So AeroPress, for the price that you're charging, I think you can do a lot better. Okay, now before we brew, we need to do a little bit of math. Just bear with me. Now, there's been a lot of talk about puck depth and how one is better than the other. But in my testing, I found that a taller puck gives you a little more consistency shot after shot when we're talking, say, espresso. But I've definitely had coffees where I've preferred the 58 basket and had other coffees where I've preferred the 49 basket. So from a flavor standpoint, there is a difference, but I wouldn't say one is better than the other. And we have a similar situation here. We have two AeroPresses, and as you can see, there's a pretty significant difference in the height. And that's because the old AeroPress is 57 in diameter, and this is about 7 smaller. So there is going to be a difference if you dose the same amount of coffee into both of these brewers in terms of the bed depth. So what I'm trying to do here is do a little bit of math so we can figure out if we put X grams of coffee into the AeroPress, then how much would that need to reduce by in order to maintain the same bed depth. Okay, so first we have the old AeroPress, which is, like I said, 57 in diameter. And then we have the new one, which is 50. And then we have the formula for the volume of a cylinder, which is V is equal to pi r squared h, where pi is a constant, r is the radius, and h is the height. Now, obviously, we're trying to keep the height the same. So that will remain a constant. We change the volume to mass by density. H is equal to mass by pi r squared into density. We then have m1 by pi r squared 1 into the density, which is also equal to m2 divided by pi r2 squared into density. And you get m2 is equal to approximately 10.8 grams. So basically, if you have a 14-gram dose here, which is what we're going to be brewing, we're going to be using 10.8 grams in the AeroPress Premium to have the same bed depth. A bit convoluted, I know, but I wanted to do this with the two brewers so that we're able to compare it without having the influence of the bed depth. And of course, I'm no math professor, so if I've screwed up here, then I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments below. Okay, let's make some coffee. Today we're going to be using a pretty old recipe, but one that's aged really well. I use it all the time because of how simple it is and it brews a delicious cup of coffee. It's Tim Wendelbo's recipe, and if you haven't tried it, it's basically 14 grams of coffee with 200 grams of water at 96 degrees Celsius. You pour the water in quickly, 3 front to back stirs very carefully so that you're doing the same stirs every single time. Put the plunger in so the drips stop, and then at the 1 minute mark, take the plunger off, again 3 front to back stirs, put the plunger back on, and slowly press for about 30 seconds. Now here, we did the math. We're going to be using 10.8 grams of coffee, and to match the ratio, 155 mils of water. And I'm going to be doing the exact same thing. It's near impossible to brew these simultaneously, and also I'm definitely going to burn myself and probably break the AeroPress, so I'm not even going to attempt it. I will brew the old one first, and then I will brew the new one second, and then I will temperature match them before I do the tasting. So let's get started. Let me just preload these with this nifty funnel, which you don't get with any of the new AeroPresses, unfortunately. 14 grams, 10.8 grams. So if these were perfectly level, then you could measure them and see that they're roughly the same height. I'm always nervous brewing on camera because you got to coordinate a bunch of stuff. Not very good at that, so let's just see how this goes. I'll try and keep it as consistent between the two brews as possible. $200, take the paddle, 1, 2, 3, get that out, plunger in, and stop the drips. We're at 30 seconds. Let me get this off the scales because you don't want to be plunging on scales. We're now at 48, 49, 10 seconds to go. All right, 1 minute. I take the plunger out, take the paddle, 1, 2, 3, then back on, and very gently. You really don't want any additional pressure to be applied here because you're going to get more astringency and bitterness in the cup. And I generally don't push through the hiss. I'm done. And there we have the first brew. Let us very quickly do the second one. So there's minimum gap between the two. So here I need to do 155. Let's go. Okay, perfect. 1, 2, 3. Then out, and there we go. These are both preheated, and you'll see why when we look at the temperature tests. And 1 minute, let me get this off. 1, 2, 3. And then close this. Sorry, I knew I was going to do something wrong. Get this off and plunge. Not too shabby. I think I can be forgiven for that one mistake. Near identical in terms of brew time. There we have it. 2 AeroPresses that are brewed with the same puck depth, exact same grind size, same recipe. Let's taste. Now, obviously, this is going to be slightly higher in temperature. I'll cool that down by getting it into a ceramic cup or something like that before putting it in the cupping bowls. But let me prep the tasting, and I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, we have the 2 brews here. I'm just going to get Namisha to mix these up, and we'll see if I can spot the difference. Okay, I've done this a bunch of times. No spoilers. Let's just taste this. Very tasty. Pretty much exactly the same. I mean, let me try again. If I spot a difference, it would just be guesswork at this point. They are near identical. I can't even tell you how similar these two are. I mean, for no reason, I'm just going to guess that this is the AeroPress Premium. And I'm wrong. So this has been consistently the results that I've had when I've matched the puck depth. But obviously, when I haven't, there have been differences in the brew, and this makes a lot of sense because if you are changing the depth, you need to change grind size. So if you keep the grind size the same and you brew a batch with the old AeroPress and the new one, you're going to have slight differences in the cup. And whether you prefer one or the other will entirely depend on the coffee. And this has been my experience. So I would love to hear if any of you have done the same test. But now I'm going to clean up, finish drinking these because it's a delicious coffee. And then we can talk about what it's actually like to use this brewer every day. Okay, we made some coffee with this thing. Now, before I talk about the user experience, let's look at temperature for a second. Now, if you watch James Hoffman's video, he had very interesting results where the original AeroPress started at a higher temperature, but the temperature decline was a little more rapid. So somewhere around the 2 or 4 minute mark, I forget, the temperatures actually cross over, and beyond that point, the AeroPress Premium is at a higher temperature than the original. So I was pretty excited to do this test. The way that I set this up was to first invert both the AeroPresses. Yes, I risked my life for this video, so the least you could do is hit like and subscribe. I then filled it with 200 mils of water and pushed the plunger down so that it was absolutely brimming. I did this because the filter on the AeroPress Premium is a chunky piece of metal, and this way both filter caps make contact with the water and influence the test. We did this without a preheat and then with a quick preheat, and the results were absolutely boring. So if you look at the no preheat test, you can see that the AeroPress consistently sits at around 3.5 to 4 degrees cooler than the OG. And then with the quick preheat, you can see that the AeroPress Premium now sits at just under a degree below the original. I'm sure a slightly more aggressive preheat would have got it near identical. And again, there is no interesting crossover. It just stays like this for well over 10 minutes. Now, I'm not saying James's results are incorrect. These things can be greatly influenced by the methodology and the environment. For example, the ambient temperature in the UK is very different to what it is here in India. These are the results that I got with my methodology and the way that I thought it was best to compare these two brewers. Now, if any of you out there have done this test, then I would love to know what your results were. Let me know in the comments below. So to summarize, the temperature decline on the two brewers is near identical. And if you did a quick preheat on the premium, you'll get near identical thermal performance to the original. Okay, let's get back to what it's like to actually use the AeroPress Premium every day. If I had to summarize the UX of this brewer in one line, it would be this. It is very, very similar to the original, just a little more inconvenient. Now, firstly, having a big chunk of metal on a glass carafe and then proceeding to press it down is quite a meditative experience. And then, if you're lucky, the plunger will tilt a bit and scrape against the glass. Yep, that can happen. Also, if you're brewing something like James's recipe where you have to swirl this bloody thing, oh, that is quite the rush. We also have this chunky ass filter now that gets hot. One more thing that you need to think about that you didn't have to with the original. I mean, you could use the plastic one, it fits, but that's like putting a $5 UV filter on a $5,000 lens for protection. You photographers know what I'm talking about. Also, the fact that it can break, you wouldn't really travel with it. I mean, you can, I wouldn't. And lastly, you can no longer just chuck this in the dishwasher. It is hand wash only. Now, there are some positives. Well, one, other than the fact that it's built really well and looks very nice, for the people that care about this, with the AeroPress Premium, you get a no plastic brew path. Unless you're crazy enough to brew inverted with this thing, water only comes in contact with glass and stainless steel, and that is a huge positive for a lot of people. So other than that, it's just a little worse than the original in pretty much every single way, which is very unfortunate. And then we have the biggest elephant in the room, the price. Sitting at $200 US, this is 5 times more expensive than the original and 4 times more expensive than the clear. So who is it actually for? Well, I can think of 2 groups of people who would probably buy this. One is the AeroPress fan or the coffee nerd, someone who collects brewers. Then this is the nicest and best built AeroPress that you can possibly buy. It would be a great addition to your collection and last you a long, long time. The other group of people is even more niche. So you have the folks who are absolutely averse to plastic when it comes to anything to do with food and beverage. And then within that, you have a smaller group of people who actually enjoy drinking coffee. Within that, you have an even smaller group of people who brew their own coffee. And within that is a tiny group of people who've always wanted an AeroPress but never got one because plastic, for all of you, this is it. If you're willing to spend $200. Now listen, I love the AeroPress, much like most other coffee people, and my review of the clear was pretty glowing. This, I just can't seem to get behind. But now I would really love to hear from all of you. Have I been too harsh? And are you one of those people who've been waiting for the AeroPress Premium for a long time? Were you happy with this or a little bit disappointed like I was? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, thank you so much for watching and brew ARAMSE.